He could interpret it as asking the crown prince of a country to run an errand for him, but it didn't seem like that. It was a favor to a friend. A favor to a friend I met for the first time. Winfred nodded as if she had read his mind. He didn't know what was wrong with Isla, but every time he saw her sad expression, he felt like something fell into his heart. Well, let's go. I'll take you there. Isla went up to the roof, cleaned the handkerchief Winfred had lent her, folded it carefully, and handed it to her. Winfred, who for some reason had become less talkative, took the handkerchief and put it in her pocket. In the middle of the night, when there were far fewer people on the streets than during the day, the two people descended from the roof and approached the opulent house where Winfred was staying. She watched the mansion as she hid in the alley and noticed the worried expression on the face of the chamberlain who had earlier gone hunting for Winfred. There wasn't much fuss because they couldn't announce that the prince was gone. Look. How many people are suffering because you went out to play secretly? All right. I'll be careful now, Winfred said sullenly. It would have been fair to let Winfred go if so many people were looking for him. Winfred turned her head instead of trying to leave the alley when Isla signaled to her. Isla. That? Can we meet again? It was a serious question. Isla was lost in thought. Someday. Once his revenge was consummated, he could be reunited as Crown Prince of the Palace Empire as the Princess of the Duke of Weishafen. Maybe. When she nodded, Winfred asked in an incredulous voice. Really? Hey. He was so happy. Winfred smiled with a face brighter than the moon in the night sky. Well, I'm leaving then, Isla. We must meet again. Even after saying goodbye, his steps did not slow down much. After looking towards Isla, Winfred walked out of the alley where the street lights were shining brightly. Your Highness. Where have you gone? What is that crap? Where have you rolled around to get your clothes so dirty? The chamberlain who discovered it ran towards Winfred, making a fuss. He thought there was nothing he could do to avoid being scolded, but the reprimand he received was greater than he expected, so Winfred smiled awkwardly and apologized. I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Because he made a promise to Isla. Let's go in quickly. Are you hurt? If by chance, His Highness got hurt. Winfred looked up at the night sky, listening to the chamberlain's words that bothered her ears with one ear and let out of the other. It was because he had the thought that, somewhere on the roofs of those buildings, Isla, curled up like a cat and hidden, was watching him. As Winfred expected, Isla, who had been hiding high up to watch for his safe return, headed to the inn room as soon as he disappeared from sight. I was worried because the outing took longer than expected. Luckily, Laura was sleeping soundly, oblivious to the rest of the world, and there was no sign of anyone entering the room. Isla had hung up the cloak she had worn before, sat on the bed, watched Laura's movements, and carefully summoned the magic box. She was worried that Laura would wake up from snapping her fingers, but fortunately she didn't wake up from that level of noise, perhaps because she was given sleeping pills. Isla sighed softly, took out the sleeping pills she had hidden under her pillow, and carefully placed them in the box. Then, he took out the pocket watch that Winfred had given him and looked at it. Is it okay if I wind this mainspring? I was actually eager to estimate the time based on the positions of the stars and the moon each night, but I was very lucky to have a watch. Isla looked at her pocket watch and remembered Winfred's face. The face that beamed at him when he told him they could see each other again kept coming back as if it had been etched in his mind. Golden eyes can look very good. It was clearly the same color as Byron's. Byron's eyes seemed bright and greedy, which made her feel bad, but Winfred's were clear and pleasant. While I thought about that, I watched the second hand of the watch move with a lost gaze. He heard a noise coming up the stairs in the distance. It could be someone on guard, but you never knew. He quickly put the pocket watch back in the box, made it disappear, and pretended to sleep. waiting again for the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs. However, against his wishes, the owner of the footsteps approaching the room did not pass by and even knocked on the door. "Who is it?" At this time. It was almost 3 in the morning. Even Byron, who was nocturnal, would have fallen asleep drunk. Who the hell was it that was looking for his room so early? It was difficult. If he hadn't let her sleep, Laura would have stayed by his side all night. If he heard a knock at the door, he opened it immediately and asked who it was. However, since she did not know who it was and could not open the door herself, Isla clung tightly to the blanket and trembled with anxiety. It was at that moment. "Laura." The owner of the knock called Laura and opened the door carefully. It was the voice of Cloud, who had tried to harm Winfred, but failed and disappeared. "Laura?" Her niece, who was supposed to be awake, seemed embarrassed because she hadn't responded. Looking into the room, he saw Laura slumped in her chair. "Laura, wake up, please." Cloud's voice grew louder. No matter how much I shook him, he didn't wake up, so it was understandable. Isla, who was pretending to be asleep, pursed her lips and trembled with anxiety. He couldn't even predict how the situation would develop. At the time, he was worried that Laura might be sick and might have even called a doctor. I was very worried that it might turn out that Laura had taken sleeping pills. "Laura, come to your senses." "Laura." Now, Cloud, whose voice calling for his niece is mixed with moisture, desperately called for Laura, and Laura, who was fast asleep, woke up while rubbing her eyes. "Uncle? You surprised me. Are you okay?" Fortunately, Laura, who was just caught in the clutches of sleep and didn't have any problems with her body, covered her mouth and yawned. What's happening?" At this time, Laura, who calmly greeted her uncle, must have woken up completely, and only then did her face become reflective. "Well, man. I fell asleep for a moment. Really, just a moment. For the rest, I watched carefully." "Oh really?" Laura lied without even putting saliva on her lips. "I was desperate." He was supposed to be taking care of Isla, but he was sleeping soundly. He was going to receive a severe reprimand. She didn't know what it would be like for Cloud, but if he ever got into her mother Capella's ears, he might get a beating. "So please keep it a secret from my mother. It seems like you were very tired." Cloud gently opened his mouth when he saw his niece blow while maintaining a bloodless face. 18. Although she was already of age, Laura was still a child to Cloud, since she was his niece and he watched her grow up. Her niece stayed up all night watching Isla and had no intention of scolding her for falling asleep for a while. Peaceful. "I won't tell my sister-in-law." It seems that the young woman also sleeps well. At his words, Laura sighed and sighed. Isn't that lucky? Laura wasn't the only one who felt relief and calmed her pounding heart. So did Isla, who turned her head towards the wall and pretended to sleep. It is not known what the reason for the sudden visit was, but fortunately it seems that neither the fact of giving sleeping pills to Laura nor the secret outings at night were discovered. Furthermore, he interfered with Cloud's work. Anyway, what's happening so early in the morning? "Oh, that's this." Cloud offered him the bag he had hidden in his chest. They were sweets that he had bought at the night market. The sweet aroma of freshly baked bread wafted through the air. "I went out to work and passed by the night market, and it occurred to me that you would be up all night. If there's any left over, I'll give some to that girl in the morning." After the prince suddenly disappeared from sight, Cloud was looking for a place where a child could sneak out at night. If there was one place that interested a prince raised in the imperial palace, it was the bustling night market. So, as he walked through it, he thought about his niece. His poor niece was persecuted all her life and was unable to create any happy memories of her childhood. My uncle too. Laura lowered her head slightly and opened her mouth in a voice whose thoughts were unclear. You don't like it? Then I'll try something else later. I'm going to eat it by myself. Why would I share it with that girl, just because she's pretty? Because Cloud was worried that Laura wouldn't like it, Laura opened her mouth and spoke insistently. That's what he said, but Laura was expressing that she really liked Cloud's surprise gift. Cloud laughed lightly at his nephew's reaction and left the room, saying he was leaving. Isla pretended to turn around and turned her head to look at Laura with narrowed eyes. He looked carefully at the gift his uncle had left him. What was I thinking? She felt very strange. Despite being the crown prince of the empire, wasn't it truly ironic that Cloud, who tried to kill Winfred, a precious boy to some, cared so deeply for his niece? Isla tried to shake off her complicated thoughts. If he had been a little late, they would have been in big trouble, but how lucky he was to get ahead this time. I just had to think about that. Isla was deep in complicated thoughts for a while, when she heard the sound of Laura putting candy in her mouth. She fell asleep shortly after.